Hi, this is Brad Shit, and you're probably wondering how I got into this situation of being chased by basically every single boss in Elden Ring. Well, I was stupid enough to try doing the Elden Ring challenge run where I replaced every single enemy and animal in the game with one of its many bosses, which was a choice I quickly came to regret. And you might actually think that sounds easy because couldn't I just run past every boss? But I wish it was that simple, because a lot, and I mean a lot of the time, insanely huge bosses will block your way and spam you down with a billion projectiles, making it near impossible to run past them. So it had to be really creative with methods to be able to complete this behemoth of a challenge. So without further ado, let's do this. So our journey begins like any other Elden Ring journeys at the Chapel of Anticipation. Only this time it's the fucking fire giant waiting for us. And like the absolute national-born gamer that I am, I absolutely wreck him. Anyways, ignoring that tiny oopsie, we continue down the cave of knowledge just to get a feel of what we're in for. And oh boy, this is going to be one of those videos, isn't it? Ignoring the countless bosses ahead, I narrowly dodged them, and after a few tries I got to where the strongest boss in the game usually resides. But since this is a complete randomizer, the Soldier of Godric was replaced by the Snail of Godric, which luckily ended up not being much of a challenge at all. And oh boy, this was truly the calm before the storm, as we now could finally head out to Limgrave, and this side so already scared me off the journey ahead. So I quickly talked to Warrior called Maidenless, and after activating the grace I immediately get jump scared by an Estelle. But since all the bosses in the overworld had their health scaled down to the normal enemies, it wasn't that much of a problem dealing with him just alone. So our first goal of the challenge will naturally be to progress through the Stormveil gates and complete Stormveil Castle. But as I quickly discovered, this weren't going to be as easy as I'd originally hoped, as I'm already met with projectile spam from a billion different bosses wanting a piece of that delicious Bradley shit cake. But after a few failed attempts, I managed to get past the forest area where I got greeted with a horrible sight of the absolutely flooded waypoint ruins. And since I knew going in there would be suicide, I quickly ran over to the grace where we meet our maiden Malenia. And just looking at Bradley, it isn't exactly hard to say why she wants to hold hands on their first meet. Continuing up the hill is where we met our first real challenge of the run. In that there are a ton of areas in the game that have very narrow paths with a lot of enemies, which would mean a ton of basically unavoidable bosses for us. And since Miyazaki thought it was a great idea to give every boss in the game a billion projectiles, situations like this weren't exactly as trivial as just running straight past the danger. So I had two options: either fight my way through or hope I get lucky with their attack pattern so I could run past them. I decided on the former, but as I quickly grasped, it is insanely hard to juggle between a million bosses at the same time, which resulted in me dying a bunch. I even tried luring them out one by one, but that too would also result in failure. I could just continue banging my head against the wall by fighting them, but I thought it would be smarter to just try running past them for now, which wasn't exactly easy either, but I luckily managed to get past the horde after a few tries. So I quickly grabbed the Stormveil Jack race, and just up ahead yet another wall of pain awaits me. So I yet again figured out it was going to be near impossible to fight him head on at my current level. So I just bang my head at the problem until it magically solves itself again, and I get past him to arrive at the first boss. So getting Ancestral Spirit as the first boss encounter might not sound as bad, as it's probably one of the easiest bosses in Elden Ring, but the problem is that he'll start healing himself around mid-battle, which will mean that his self-bar is essentially tripled, which made him a huge pain in the ass, especially when he suddenly decided to become Sonic the Hedgehog on this relatively small arena. But after a few attempts he luckily goes down and gives us the right half of the Dectus Medallion, which we essentially need to finish the game, so it was quite a lucky drop. We had no time to reflect on our cringe however, because Stormveil Castle awaits. But we are unfortunately quickly stopped by a fair maiden who invites us to the round table hold. But I humbly decline because I have better things to do. Okay boys, the plan is simple. To take down our first remembrance boss, we will need to infiltrate Stormveil Castle. I knew that going straight to the main gates would have to be reserved for worst case scenarios only with how extremely dense that area is with enemies. So I tell the guards to open the gates just in case and head towards the mountainside route, which luckily goes pretty smoothly until I realized that the entrance to the castle was blocked by a huge tree spirit which just continuously spammed me down with a billion projectiles, something that made it incredibly hard to get past them. But I kept on trying until I noticed that this route would already be completely out of the question since the door was completely blocked off by fire giant, making it virtually impossible to get in. So without hesitation I turned to the main gate, which unsurprisingly enough was filled to the brim with bosses all around. First of which being Vike, who luckily got separated from the rest of the pack, so taking him down alone wasn't that bad. And next up was a Foreskin Apostle and 2 Crystal Knights. But it was kinda at this point I just realized how incredibly hard it would be to separate the rest of the bosses, so I tried running past them instead, which was immediately shut down by a freaking Elden Beast who apparently resided there too now. So it was yet again back to my usual strategy of just just running, which you might see how fun that was. So my current plan was just to get to the Divine Tower Grace on the right side, which should be manageable with enough luck and correctly timed rolls. And after a few tries I actually managed to reach it, but there wasn't a lot of time for celebration yet, unfortunately, since we still had to get to the actual boss Grace, which was still pretty far away. So I tried the same strategy I've used up until now of just trying my best to run past every boss with the best of my rolling abilities, but it turned out that the challenge was much harder than last time. And even if I somehow miraculously managed to get up to the plain section above the hill, there would still be a billion bosses waiting for me to rudely say hi to my face with their weapons. So I was kinda just stuck here for a while. I even tried using a summon as a distraction, but that really didn't work either, as he also got taken down way too quickly and didn't draw the aggro of enough enemies to be of any significant help. So my current options are either go to the side route, which was completely blocked by a fire giant, continue trying to go through the main gate, which proved to be near impossible, or try to take the mountainous path to temporarily bypass Stormveil Castle and go straight to Liurnia. I decided on the latter, but after checking it out, the road was way too narrow with way too many enemies to realistically be able to get past on my current level. I even tried fighting my way through, but in the end it was way too much to handle. I was already completely stumped on what to do. Would we really fail a challenge so early on? No, I knew it was still too early to give up. So we went back to the main gate to start grinding the exact attack patterns of the bosses and had to just narrowly avoid and survive them. And I also went back to get a few more levels, which I invested in vigor by fighting a Rick and an ancestral spirit I randomly found in East Limgrave. And after a few hours of trying, I finally managed to sprint to the left section of the Warzone plains, where I could finally at long last catch a breath. And just up ahead through the grafting hall was the elevator, which would finally take me to another grace point. The relief I felt at this point was immense, and it felt like the challenge was finally possible to complete. Being up on the rooftop where there is a lot of fewer enemies is an amazing strategic position to be in right now, and would also give us a pretty straightforward and easy way to the boss arena. So I jump off the rooftop on the right and continue my way towards the open plain area again. And since the amount of enemies here weren't that bad, I could easily take them out to avoid having to deal with them chasing me down and making things 10x harder. So I jump towards the plains again and head straight towards the boss area, which didn't exactly go as planned, as I got stuck on the spiky fence and got screwed from behind by the boys protecting the boss room. So instead of having to go over the rooftop over and over again to reattempt this, I just went and activated the second grace, which would make the run back much more manageable. With it activated, I attempted to go to the last grace a few more times until I eventually got it, which means it's officially time for our first remembrance boss. And with that, the magma worm went down.
All that is golden.
So it was finally now time to head to our next destination, Liurnia of the Lakes. And luckily this is one of the widest areas in the game, making traversal a bit less hazardous. So I immediately head over to the Church of Iris to talk to the magician guide when I suddenly got ambushed by a big barker boy, a knight's cavalry, and the cherry on top was getting yeeted into oblivion by Godfrey. So I naturally noped out of there and came back a little more sneaky like, which luckily meant I was finally able to talk to and check out what the magician dude was selling, despite Bradley being dumb as bricks. And it was here I saw one of the best spells I ever could have asked for in a run like this, where stealth is often key, and that is Unseen Form, which would basically make your range of aggro smaller, something that proved to really be a golden opportunity I had to grab. Only problem again is that Bradley shit is dumb as bricks, meaning I wouldn't be able to use it for a good while anyways. But without further ado, I head straight towards Hogwarts, where the next main boss resides. But since this is a total randomizer, meaning every item would also be randomized, I had a slight problem, since you'd normally need a glintstone key to access the academy gates, which you would find beside the glintstone dragon. But as you can see, the key wasn't here anymore. But before turning Liurnia upside down to find it, I took a quick detour to Ohio to run around and see if we could find anything interesting, which aside from a few neat items and Malenia the Blade of Miquella, I didn't. So it was now time to head back in search of the glintstone key. I then started looking frantically all over Liurnia to try and find it, and I even completed the entire Caelid Manor, which was a fun little side trip, but I still couldn't find any signs of the key. Well, that was until I checked the freaking shop at the very start of Liurnia, and lo and behold, there it was right under my nose. So with the glintstone key finally in hand, I head towards the main academy gate to finally enter Hogwarts. And like expected, the place was filled to the brim with bosses all around who would commit mass projectile spam, making it near impossible to get through. And the sheer on top was that a fire giant was blocking the main path, so I had to use the narrow mountain path on the left. But that path was of course blocked by a falling star beast. Additionally, to make it even harder, the fire giant could apparently hit us through the wall. That's fun. After a few attempts of getting through, I thought it was finally about time we tried a new unseen form spell. So I went back to Sea Over River, which I've accessed a bit earlier in the run, and found a few runes there to level up. And I also paid good old Grail a visit since it was apparently too large to get randomized. So I could now finally level up intelligence enough till Bradley was finally smart enough to use unseen form. So I yet again headed back to Hogwarts to finally take the spell for a spin. And even though it wasn't extremely overpowered, it lowered the enemy's aggro range just enough to where it became manageable to get past, which takes us to the first boss of the academy, namely the Tree Spirit of Radagon. And I'm not gonna lie, it was a bit annoying fighting him in such a small arena, and apparently the Elden Beast from the outside also wanted to join in on the fun, which made it almost impossible to do it on my first try. But once I finally managed to de-aggro the Elden Beast, the fight wasn't all that hard. The run to Niall was also surprisingly easy, as there are barely any enemies blocking your way there. Other than a little difficult fight with the white mask, we make our way to Niall chamber, where I was kindly greeted by yet another gang fight, which is always fun, especially when it can inflict Scarlet Rot. But once you're able to separate the Clean Rot Knights, they weren't much of a problem at all, which finally brings us to phase 2. Oh fuck. Ah shit, here we go. What a horrible boss! Well, you leave me no choice. Time to use the big guns. Maybe a bit overkill, but subscribe nonetheless. So with Liurnia of the Lakes finally crossed off our list, I now decided to head through the mountain path leading to Atlas Plateau, so I could finally activate the Radahn Festival. And the first thing we encounter is naturally our giant soldier of Nokron blocking our path. Next up was a Commander Niall blocking our path with his super annoying AoE attacks. And running past him didn't exactly work great either, so I had to be a little more sneaky with my sneaking, which somehow miraculously worked out in our favor. So furthermore, I just ran to the next room filled to the brim with monsters where I unfortunately got poisoned. But luckily I got to the elevator without much trouble despite that. So I grabbed the grace and take another elevator up to find a Malenia and a Rune Bear waiting for me. But despite wanting to just run away, I decided to stand my ground and fight them, which turned out to be a long and epic battle of the ages. And by that I of course mean I ran right past them. But even then I couldn't really proceed much farther since the road was completely blocked by a Dragonkin soldier and a Malekith, which was extremely bad news bears for me. So I decided that instead of hammering my head against the wall for another hour, I would try playing this a little smarter by going for the remaining Dectus medallion, which naturally weren't all that easy either since it also was completely randomized. But before all that I decided to take care of even more important business. And that business was none other than saying hi to everybody's waifu, because you can actually access the Radahn Festival by helping her out too. So I decided that hey, that would be way more fun than searching for hours for the last medallion. So after talking with everybody in the run is rise, I headed to Sea Over River to talk to everybody's favorite wolfman, Blythe, who unfortunately weren't able to find access point to the eternal city of Nokron. So he suggests going back to the weird wizard man, but he is also kind of mean, so I went back to plan A. And luckily for my sanity I were able to locate the second half of the Dectus medallion fairly easily, which meant I now just needed to head back to the Bellum Highway. And this is unrelated to the run, but just for a second look at my pro gamer skills, like holy shit that was close. But anyways, we head to the lift and raise the pretty medallion, which finally gives us access point to the Atlas Plateau, which would meet all the necessary quotas to finally be able to activate the Radahn Festival, which we needed to be to get into the capital. So without further ado, I head straight to the disgusting mainland of Ohio to get to the now activated teleporter right outside Redmane Castle, which would instantly teleport us to the festival meeting place, where every great warriors in the lands between is preparing themselves for the battle of the ages against the oh so fair Starscourge Radahn Daniel. Look at them kicks, boy! But as the most astute viewers might have noticed, it isn't Radahn we would need to fight because, you know, this is a randomizer and all. And it turns out Radahn is replaced by good old Margarita himself, myself, which is far from the worst possibility imaginable. But I have to honestly say that I really dislike this fight myself, as his moves are incredibly unpredictable and frantic, in combination with his near impossible to dodge dagger swipes and how it just never stops attacking. Let me know in the comments if I'm insane for this take. But anyways, despite all that, he isn't the hardest boss, so he goes down in a few too many tries, which releases a myriad of stars from the sky, and that means it's officially time to move against the capital of Gaul itself, Leyndell. And what's Leyndell, you might ask? Leyndell this nut. Before that, I just have to mention that I for some unknown reason decided to take a trip to the underground with all the tight cave systems, which was not a fun time at all, as I could barely get past any of the bosses, which was fun, but when I finally did, a horrifying sight awaited me. So for some reason I went straight back to the overworld, where I continued towards Leyndell, and when I finally arrived outside the main gates, I was greeted by a draconic duelist who had replaced the sentinel. And I gotta be honest, the duelist is probably one of the most fun battles, or duels if you will. I really gotta start writing better scripts in the whole game. He's just a really well balanced fight all around, with a super fun and intuitive moveset to dodge. It really feels like it's ripped straight from Dark Souls 3, and I mean that in the absolute best way possible. And these battles got incredibly intense too. But on the second try, the draconic duelist finally went down after a long and epic battle. But after trying to enter the capital, I got a very scary message denying us entry. And oh, we of course need another remembrance to enter. That's just great. Furthermore, that remembrance would probably have to be from that one place. Oh boy, this is going to be some serious shite, isn't it? So without even thinking about the consequences of the economy's collapse, I headed straight from Mount Gelmir, where we would come to have a really fun time like I could expect from such an amazingly forgiving challenge like this. But anyways, at the mansion itself, I immediately go talk to Tanya, who basically just gives us the synopsis of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, about how a scary snake is slithering the walls, scaring all its inhabitants. And by inhabitants, I mean a billion bosses lurking, of course. And I ended up being stuck in this wall for hours. This fucking shit. Why is there so many bosses? After easily getting past the wall of annoyance, I got to the open area, which was a pleasant contrast to what fresh fuckery I've just gotten out of. Meaning I were now free to... Yeah, you didn't really think it was going to be that easy, did you? So I basically just jumped on the roof, where I managed to barely dodge a falling star beast that was very adamant about screwing me over. But luckily I managed to get past him, where I basically just cruised past the entire indoor section without much issue. But the real challenge came across us all when I encountered the bottom side of Volcano Manor, where all the bullshit of lands between have apparently decided to reside. So the main problem there was basically that to get across the lava section to get to the next boss, I'd need to either climb down this ladder or jump straight down. The problem is, no matter which one of these methods I chose, immediate buttfuckery awaited me, as the lava would slow Bradley down to almost a halt, while a million bosses, and even possibly, I didn't count, trillion minions surrounded him to get a piece of his ass. So I had to be a little more creative with this one, rather than just throwing my head against the wall until something actually worked. So I instead cast Unseen Form and tried jumping to the far right side to sneak my way past the enemies, to hopefully not aggro every enemy all at once. But I'm misbegotten, and sometimes a Mogh and a tree sentinel will always be there without fail to say hello. But after a while I luckily managed to get past them and somehow managed to push my way up to the rooftops. So now I just had to brace myself and run, and I luckily managed to get past, which means I was finally in the clear. And hey, would you look at that, seems like Rykard decided to go out for a smoke. That's honestly none of my business, so I had to activate the bridge and fight the shade that awaited me in the next boss room, which weren't too much of a problem, but I still managed to die once as the shade somehow attacked at supersonic speeds. So after getting him done on my second try, I decided to go say hi to Rykard, which went amazingly. Don't know why I had to egg him on. But without further ado, I concluded it was time to head on towards the main remembrance boss. And it was naturally a ginormous mess like you'd come to expect from this very stupid challenge. But with the help of Unseen Form, I managed to get past everyone after a lot of tries, which quite honestly involved a lot of luck. The hardest part about it was just this Rykard blocking the way to the teleporter, but I luckily barely managed to jump past him. And by that I of course mean I missed, and he luckily moved out of the way. So now all that was left was activating the teleporter. Now all that was left was activating the teleporter, which takes us to the audience chambers to fight the last boss we would need to beat before finally heading into the end game. And the boss awaiting us on the other side of that nasty piss gate was none other than Commander Niall and his knights. And I gotta be honest, despite the huge arena, Niall wasn't much easier than normal, as my weapons barely did any damage at all to him. But first thing first, I decided my best bet was to separate him from his banished knights, so I could basically just backstab spam them with the usual circling shield strategy, energy until I could finally take them both down to focus on Niall alone. And Niall's second phase is honestly one of the coolest boss encounters in Elden Ring in my honest opinion. His insane lightning acrobatics contrasts very well with his ice storms, and dodging them feels really tight and intuitive compared to a lot of other boss encounters in the game. The only problem is that his moves do a metric ton of damage, which makes him an incredibly unforgiving boss to fight. Also, the fact that I had to take out his knights every time before even getting a chance to fight him was also really frustrating, as they would almost always land a few hits, draining some of the precious crimson tears we would need for Niall himself. But luckily, after what felt like an endless amount of tries, I finally took him down. But that was when it dawned on me that Rykard is usually a two-phase fight, which would mean... oh no. If fighting Niall and his goons alone weren't enough, I would now have to fight the Red Wolf of Radagon 2 in what was essentially a boss rush. And the Red Wolf alone honestly wasn't the biggest issue here, but the fact that I would almost never have any healing left after Niall was the real problem here. So I didn't really find it realistic to fight the Red Wolf without any healing when I barely did any damage to him, which means I had two possible options: either give up and try to find another Remembrance boss, or finally upgrade my weapons. And I chose the latter. We can't give up on Niall and the Red Wolf yet. So I went across the lands between to gather all the necessary materials, and with that, we officially have a fully upgraded weapon that could match the level of our enemies. So with our beautiful and shiny +9 ornamental straight sword, we head back to the audience chambers to get a long-awaited revenge. And this time, when Bradley actually had a usable damage output, the tides completely shifts, and we finally get Niall and the Red Wolf down. We now officially had every single Remembrance boss we would need to finally put an end to this awful challenge and head into the oh-so-fair royal capital, Leyndell. But I gotta be transparent with you all. I kinda managed to lose the footage for the entire Leyndell section, but don't you worry, I've got you covered with this totally accurate representation of my run-through. Wow, look at him go! Sheesh, how do you even get that good at games? Wow, insane skills, superb timing. Wow, the boss was Malenia, and he did it without getting hit. Impressive. So yeah, now that you're all caught up to speed with things, we can finally head over to Sweden. But unfortunately, the border police wasn't very nice to us and absolutely decimated me. So next time I just kinda ran past. So yeah, welcome to Sweden. I've been there before, so I can confirm that this is in fact the land of the Swedes. So we yet again ran past a billion Swedish people and took the area boss because I was feeling a spicy IKEA joke, finally getting us to the top of the mountain. And I gotta say, this place was not funny at all with the insane enemy density, along with their sudden exponential increase in scale. But luckily for us, we managed to ride past most of them without confrontation with the use of Unseen Form and Torrent. And aside from a few unfortunate deaths, Mountaintops of the Giant weren't all that bad, to both my pleasure and surprise. Also, shout out to the fighting Knight Rider and Pumpkinhead over there. When we finally get to the Fire Giant's boss arena, quite a menacing sight awaits us, as we now have to fight the hardest boss in the game, fucked up looking dog. So I put on my big boy pants to face the more than worthy adversary, and born in the world of strife against the odds, we managed to get the burial dog ass down, which throws us directly into phase 2, fucked up looking plant. And after weeding it out, we go up to the forge and talk to Malenia, who proceeds to drug us down and leave us in the most hostile motel I've ever seen. Like, where is this place? You did not see that happen. That didn't happen either. Alright, enough of this silly tomfoolery. It is now time to endure more CBT. And by CBT I naturally mean very contemptible bad time. Well, luckily this place is rid of any annoying birds, which is cool. So after a bunch of very painstaking attempts at running through the area, we arrive at the infamous Foreskin Arena, where a relatively welcome sight of a Dragonkin soldier awaited us, which isn't a super awful boss to defeat at all. The only problem is that his summon did an absurd amount of physical and elemental damage, making the need to be extremely careful around him a necessity to survive. I can't honestly say I remember his second phase either from the base game, where he suddenly powers off the ice magic, but all in all, learning his attack patterns weren't that bad at all, luckily. So after a few attempts, the Dragonkin soldier goes down. What the fuck just happened there? Are you kidding me? What? I have honestly no idea what happened there, but we'll just ignore it for now and move on. So without hesitation, we continued our colorful adventure towards the freedom of doing literally anything but this challenge. And I gotta be transparent with you all, the stretch through Malekith's boss arena was not fun at all. But you probably know the drill by now. I threw my head at the wall a billion times, experienced the worst ball torture of my life, until I finally got to the Great Bridge bonfire. But before saying hi to Malekith's substitute step in, I decided to just lay down and unwind for a bit after all the stress this challenge has given me. me. And in classic Souls fashion, you can't even take a nap without causing the biggest oopsie mankind has ever witnessed. The boss waiting for us on the other side, however, wasn't the strongest to say the least. Looks like Dragon Lord Precipes got one of his goons to step in for him, while he's probably off on his government-funded retirement cruise in the Caribbean. And after a single try, I meant 2 tries. Alright, you get the point, it goes down after a while at least. Which means we officially just have a single more challenge here in the skies. The best before we can finally finish the challenge once and for all. And entering the arena, we got a terrifying sight. Because on the other side of the piss door, none other than Malenia, the blade of Miquella, awaits us. You gotta be shitting me. Yeah, seeing Malenia in a place like this wasn't exactly a welcome sight to say the least. The reason why being pretty self-explanatory if I do say so myself. We had to fight Malenia, the blade of Miquella, as a 100% mandatory boss fight we would absolutely need to defeat to beat this run. Not to brag, but I've actually managed to do a no-hit run of Malenia a couple months after the game's initial release. So I wasn't completely out of my depths here with this one luckily, but I was very clearly very rusty. And I also did very little damage to her per hit, while she did massive amounts, making this very tricky. I didn't really have much of a choice. I just needed to bunker down and get really good at Malenia again. Here we go. Wait, what? Yep, that's right. If it weren't enough to take down Malenia just once, you now have to do it twice in a row, without any additional healing. I did luckily learn that you could use the pillars to avoid the main bulk of the waterfowl dance, but still, this really had to be some very cruel joke. But again, I didn't have much other choice than to just get exceptionally good at Malenia. Or so I thought. But then this happened. Malenia had somehow managed to fall off stage, instantly deleting her health bar, which pushed the Malekith fight directly into the second phase. Which is when I got a very funny idea of just replicating the exact same thing all over again, effectively trivializing the fight. Yeah, you gotta love some totally intended game mechanics. With Malenia totally fairly fought and defeated, Death is now reunited with the lands between, meaning we now just basically have the final boss remaining. So we wake up clearly drunk again in the now sand-filled capital, which we of course don't question because this is a FromSoft game. Heading to the Earth Tree, I am promptly reminded that Sir Gideon the All-Knowing is also technically a boss encounter, but my fears were quickly washed away as it possibly can't be worse than Malenia. But upon entering... After beating down yet another Malenia, we took the plunge towards the second to last boss. We were finally in the home stretch. Oh, you gotta be shitting me. Oh, finally. It was now finally time to head on into the Earth Tree to finally put an end to this awful challenge. Wait. No! And what waited me on the other side of the water-reflected surface was even more terrifying than I ever could have imagined. The truest, hardest boss in the game, Soldier of Godric. I kinda just lost the footage for this fight, but you just have to believe me, it was majestic. And I totally won, of course. Yeah, of course. Yes. Yeah. 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 Ugh.